Today, we're talking about getting a really great tan and having sex. It's not spring break, it's Peptides 101. Today, we're discussing three peptides that are all related. And the genesis of this started in the 1980s at the University of Arizona, where researchers were looking for a compound that could mimic alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone. The idea being that they could create tanning without UV exposure. Potentially, this would be protective to the skin against sun damage and potentially skin cancers. It never really materialized that way, but what they developed was something called melanotan. And it did, in fact, increase skin pigmentation and was eventually approved by the FDA for use in a very specific condition called EPP. Now, issues that they had with melanotan were that it wasn't real stable. It had kind of a short half-life. It didn't quite stimulate melanocortin receptors as strongly as they had hoped. So they attempted to modify the molecule and ended up producing something called melanotan 2, which does in fact bind more strongly to melanocortin receptors, increases pigmentation, and promotes a darker tanning or more of that effect than melanotan 1 did. This one was never approved by the FDA. But in the development of that molecule, they had some interesting side effects. They were seeing increased sexual arousal in both males and females and spontaneous erections in males. So this obviously created some interest, and they further modified the molecule into something known as PT-141. Now, PT-141 acts on a different subfraction of melanocortin receptors so that it doesn't have the pigmentation effects, but does have some of those effects on sexual arousal and sexual function that were seen with melanotan 2. This was eventually commercialized and developed into Vyleesi, which was approved by the FDA for treatment of low sexual arousal in women. Now, that's still used, and it's often used in an off-label fashion by men as well for the treatment of ED and low arousal conditions. So in this situation, you have three peptides that are all very closely related to one another. One led to the development of the next to the next. The one that has really stood out and lasted the longest from all this is PT-141, which is still very commonly used for men and women who are suffering from low sex drive or ED.